Docker is an open-source platform that allows developers to automate the deployment of applications inside lightweight containers. These containers package all the dependencies and code your app needs to run, ensuring it works consistently across different environments. Here's a quick breakdown of Docker's key features. Isolation. Each container runs in its own isolated environment, like a virtual machine, but without the overhead of running a full operating system. Portability. Containers can run on any system that supports Docker, making it easy to move applications between different environments. Efficiency. Containers share the host system's kernel, which makes them more lightweight and faster to start compared to virtual machines. Consistency. By packaging everything your application needs, Docker ensures that it runs the same way in development, testing, and production environments, reducing the "it works on my machine" problem. A Docker file is a text document that contains a series of instructions on how to build a Docker image. These instructions are executed step by step to create an image that can be used to run containers. Here are some key points about Docker files. Base image. The from instruction specifies the base image to use for the Docker image. Commands. Instructions like run, CMD, and entry point define commands to be executed inside the container. File operations. Copy and add are used to copy files and directories into the image. Environment variables. env sets environment variables. Ports. Expose specifies which ports the container will listen on. Metadata. Label adds metadata to the image. Here's a simple example of a Docker file. This Docker file sets up a Python environment, installs dependencies, and runs a Python application. What is Docker image? Docker images are built using the Docker file, which consists of a set of instructions that are required to containerize an application. A Docker image is a file used to execute code in a Docker container. Docker images act as a set of instructions to build a Docker container, such as a template. Docker images also act as the starting point when using Docker. An image is comparable to a snapshot in virtual machine, VM, environments. Docker images have multiple layers, each originating from the previous layer but different. A Docker image is a platform-independent image that can be built in the Windows environment, and it can be pushed to the Docker Hub and pulled by others with different OS environments like Linux. A Docker container image is a lightweight, standalone, executable package of software that includes everything needed to run an application: code, runtime, system tools, system libraries, and settings. Think of a container as another form of virtualization. VMs, also just one form of virtualization, allow a piece of hardware to host multiple operating systems as software. VMs are added to the host machine so that the hardware power can be shared among different users and appear as separate servers or machines. Containers virtualize the OS, splitting it into virtualized compartments to run container applications. Docker daemon is responsible for the assembling and running of code as well as the distribution of the finalized containers. It takes the commands a developer enters the Docker client terminal and executes them. This approach allows pieces of code to be put into smaller, easily transportable pieces that can run anywhere Linux or Windows is running. It's a way to make applications even more distributed and strip them down into specific functions. Docker Compose is a tool that simplifies the process of defining and running multi-container Docker applications. Here's a quick overview of its key features. Configuration with YAML. You define your application's services, networks, and volumes in a single YAML file. This makes it easy to manage, and the version controls your configurations. Single command operations. With a single command, Docker Compose up, you can start all the services defined in your configuration file. Similarly, you can stop, rebuild, and manage the lifecycle of your application with simple commands. Multi-environment support. Docker Compose works in various environments, including development, testing, staging, and production. This flexibility makes it a powerful tool for continuous integration, CI, workflows. Service management. You can view the status of running services, stream log outputs, and run one-off commands on services, which helps in debugging and monitoring. For example, if you're developing a web application that requires a web server, a database, and a caching service, you can define all these components in a Docker Composed YAML file and manage them together. In the README file on GitHub, there is a section titled Usage Instructions where I explain how to build the Docker image. Below, I will detail the Docker command used to build the image. The command docker build (tnode docker app) is used to build a Docker image from a Docker file. Here's a breakdown of what each part of the command does. Docker build. This is the Docker command to build an image from a Docker file. -tnode docker app. The -t flag allows you to tag the image with a name. In this case, the image is tagged as node docker app. Period. The period at the end specifies the build context, which is the current directory. Docker will look for a Docker file in this directory to build the image. In summary, this command tells Docker to create an image named node docker app using the Docker file located in the current directory. In Docker Desktop, click the Images menu to view all the images. We start with no image. When you look at the Docker file, you'll see that the first line starts with from, which pulls the Alpine node image. The second instruction sets the working directory. Next, we copy the packaged JSON file into the working directory and run the npm install command to download the dependencies to the node modules folder. Then, we copy all the code into the working directory and expose port 3000. Finally, the last command runs node app.js, which starts the web server and launches the Express program. Now we must open the terminal window so we can run the Docker command. Next, run the following Docker command: docker build -tnode docker app. Now in the Docker Desktop, click on the Images menu to see the list of images. In Docker Desktop, when you can click on the image name, Node Docker App, you can view the image layers and hierarchy used to build the base image. You can see the image's 15 layers and the hierarchy, which is based on the Linux distribution that forms the base image. In the README file on GitHub, there is a section titled Usage Instructions where I explain how to start the Docker container. Below, I will detail the Docker command used to start the container. The command docker run -p3000:3000 node docker app is used to run a Docker container from an image. Here's a breakdown of what each part of the command does. Docker run. This command is used to create and start a new container from a specified image. -p3000:3000. This flag maps port 3000 on your host machine to port 3000 in the container. This means that any traffic to port 3000 on your host will be forwarded to port 3000 in the container. Node Docker App. This is the name of the Docker image from which the container will be created. Accessing the command line is excellent for debugging your container while it's running. The Linux commands I entered the terminal perform the following actions. The pwd command in Linux stands for print working directory. It displays the current directory you're working on. When you type pwd and press enter in your terminal, it will output the full path of your current directory. The ls-law command in Linux lists all files and directories in the current directory, including hidden files. It provides detailed information about each file and directory, such as permissions, number of links, owner, group, size, and the last modification date. Here's a breakdown of what each part does. ls lists files and directories. -l uses a long listing format to provide detailed information about each file and directory. -a includes hidden files and directories in the listing. Another excellent debugging tool is the ability to inspect the file structure. You can navigate to the working directory, which is the /user/src/app folder, to check the node_modules folder. This will show what was installed when the npm install command was run. Docker Compose is a tool that simplifies the process of defining and running multi-container Docker applications. It uses a Docker Composed YML file to configure your application services. With just a single command, you can create and start all the services defined in this configuration. Ensure Docker and Docker Compose are installed. Make sure you have both Docker and Docker Compose installed on your machine. You can check by running docker -- version and docker compose -- version in your terminal. Ensure that the Docker desktop is running. Navigate to your project directory. Open your terminal and navigate to the directory containing your Docker Composed YML file using the cd command. Start Docker Compose. Run the Docker Compose up to start Docker Compose and bring up the services defined in your Docker Composed YML file. If you want to run it in detached mode, in the background, use the -d flag. Check the status. You can check the status of your services by running Docker Compose ps. Stop Docker Compose to stop and remove the containers, networks, and volumes defined in your Docker Composed YML file. Use Docker Compose down. You can stop Docker Compose from the bash terminal using Ctrl+C. The run instruction allows you to execute commands during the image build process. This is typically used to install software packages or perform setup tasks. The commands specified in the run instruction are executed in a new layer on top of the current image. In this example, the run npm install command installs the Node.js dependencies specified in the packaged JSON file. The CMD instruction specifies the default command to run when a container starts. Unlike the run instruction, which is executed during the build process, the CMD instruction is executed when the container is launched. In this example, the CMD node app.js command specifies that node app.js should be run when the container starts, which will start the Node.js application. Run executes commands at build time and creates a new image layer, used for installing software and setting up the environment. CMD specifies the command to run when a container is started. There can be only one CMD instruction in a Docker file. If multiple CMD instructions are specified, only the last one will be used.